From crack addiction to accidental entrepreneur? What? Welcome to the Joyous Expansion Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Dupree, scouring the globe to bring you stories of courage, passion, and resilience. If I could sum up this podcast into one word, I would use empathy. Now let's get inspired. Welcome to the Joyous Expansion Podcast. I am your host once again, Brett Dupree, here to drop some knowledge on you. Today we have an interview with Lorraine Reguly, a very interesting person who helps people become authors. However, this is the first part of my podcast, and the first part of my podcast is where I talk about myself, because if I cannot be vulnerable with what's going on in my life, how can I expect my guests, notice I didn't say interviewees, I finally remembered that word, you know what, to be vulnerable as well. One of the funny parts about aging is sometimes I don't know if I'm forgetting a word because it's just natural to forget words, or if it's because I'm going senile and my life is flashing before me and what is life, blah, blah, blah. Well, yeah, still going through that little existential crisis. But for the most part, I am reminded of the Serenity Prayer, even though I can't remember exactly how it goes. And I don't feel like looking it up right now, but basically the idea of granting me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and the wisdom to know which one, or something like that. That was better than I did yesterday when I thought of trying to recite it. Basically, if something I cannot control, why worry about it? And if I die and nothing happens, and I am just gone until the end of time, well, what can I do? I am here on this planet just going on. I can't control that, so let's just make the best of it while I'm here. That's what I am coming through. The thing about making the best of it while I'm here, I begin to listen to Lorraine. And one thing I like about this podcast is, number one, listening to other people's stories. It's very interesting to listen to where people are coming from and what happens in their lives. And I find that very interesting. And sometimes you listen to somebody and you can see yourself, which is the point of the podcast. I want people to listen to stories of relatively normal people talking about relatively normal things. Someday I might have a more famous people, and I'm sure some of the people I've had are more successful than others. But at the same time, I do think the lower tier, not super famous people have great stories to tell. And I think that's important to listen to. I mean, it'd be fun if I was like, It's So-Called Life, or I never actually listened to that podcast. I don't even think This American Life, that was it. I've only listened to a podcast. I only listened to an improv version of that. Apparently it was very similar. But listening to people's stories and listening to Lorraine's story, I see some parallels, but of course I see the mistake I made. I also feel like I'm an accidental entrepreneur. I never wanted to be an entrepreneur. When I started this journey, all I wanted to do was not be afraid and be able to talk to a girl and just say hi, and eventually go beyond saying hi. But at the time, saying hi was the most difficult thing ever, and I would reject myself at least 1,000,000 times per minute. But anyway, that's all I wanted. I never thought I would want to make a podcast. I never thought I'd want to be a life coach and get a life coach certification. I never thought I'd be an infinite possibilities trainer. I never thought I would become an initiate in the modern day mystery school. I never thought I would have a conversation with my ideal self or have a direct experience with who I am like I did at Warrior Sage. I never thought I would do any of those things. All I wanted to do was not be afraid anymore. And pretty much almost every aspect of my podcast, of my career as getting to this far, has been mostly accidental. It's just things piling on. Oh, I should try that. Do I try that? The thing that separates me from Lorraine is I am easily discouraged. And part of it, I was listening to Mel Robbins, and she was talking about the difference between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset. And most of my problems in my 14, 15, or 20-something years is that I do have a fixed mindset. I need to be honest with myself. That's what resilience is. And I'm thinking that I need to build my resilience muscle. However, I am one of those people who, growing up, were told how smart they were all the time, nonstop. I was also told how easy my life is going to be in a lot of sense, especially athletically. My dad said, instead of saying something along the lines of, because my dad used to be stacked. My dad was in amazing shape. He looked like a professional wrestler who was only 5'6". But he had that build, and he did not do steroids. He was naturally just stacked, and from lifting all the time and genetics. And one thing that, I never even saw protein powder around the house. It was just how he was. And I was a little chubby kid, mostly because when my parents separated, I learned later that cortisol went through my body and I gained some weight. So some people were telling me things like, your dad's so, especially like 7th grade, your dad's so stacked and you're so chubby. And I told my dad that, and he goes, well, when you hit puberty, you'll just naturally buff up. Not that if you work hard, you will get that. And I kind of did. And the thing is I never, in my life, early life, I never had to work hard. School was easy for me because I'm good at learning something and reciting it. And that's what school is. That's easy for me, especially math. I was always good at math because I'm good at learning something and reciting it and doing it quickly. I gained the skill for fun as I learned because I wanted to win, because I love winning. We used to have these contests for math. And so I developed this brain that can recite information quickly, especially one I just learned. If I study for a test and study hard, I can take a test that would take an hour in 15 minutes. And I would get the same grade if I took 15 minutes or if I took the entire hour. In fact, I might even get a lesser grade if I took the entire hour, because then I kind of second guess myself on some of the answers and pick some wrong. That's just how my brain works. And I never found that difficult. I never had to really struggle in high school or junior high and before that. It was easy. And when it came to athletics, I was good at football. I wasn't good at shot put, and I just gave that up because, honestly, I don't think my body is made for shot put because I'm just too short and I don't have a good fulcrum. But other than shot put, I was a good wrestler without trying super hard. I was a good football player. Was 5'6" and got first team in the South Puget Sound League on defense, even though I'm 5'8" as a defensive lineman. That's ridiculous. And I got my bench up to 315 without working extra hard and eating just crap, carbs and margarine. I didn't have to, and that wasn't hard for me. I didn't have to struggle until I hit college, and college I didn't do well. I didn't do well at all. That's when I developed a lot of my bad habits, and that's why it took me 6 years to get through college, and since then, life has kind of been a struggle in that sense of when something doesn't go right for me, I tend to not handle it well. And yes, I'm not blaming my parents for this. I am recognizing the fact that that's how I grew up. And because I can recognize it, I can change. That's one of the beauties of taking responsibility for your life. Taking responsibility does not mean taking blame or shame. Taking responsibility means, oh, this is an aspect of my life because I am responsible for it based off what happened to me on the outside. I made those decisions on the inside, even though they're natural for a child like me to make. I can change that. So I work on changing my resilience muscle and work on my ability to work hard and work out hard. And that's what I'm working on. And part of that is looking at successes and not just looking at failures. Because in the last year, I'm not where I want to be a year ago. It's things I haven't done. But even though I haven't lost the weight I wanted to, I still haven't gained. So a year being roughly the same 20 pounds, 420 to 400, 420 to 400, is better than going from like 400 to 450. Or something along that line. So look at the victory of that. Also, the fact that I'm on podcast 43, that's good. I mean, at this time, I want to be at 60 something, I believe. But, I'm at 43 and I've been fairly consistent overall. In fact, I started my second podcast, the Church of Awesome podcast, and that's at 12 episodes. So that's still going. Sometimes in life, you can't just look at what's going wrong because it's good to have awareness on that. Sometimes you have to look at also what's going right, what you're doing well. And there are some things that I'm doing well, like my current job, I'm doing well. They like me there. They value me, and I'm going to become a full-time employee, full-time employee with benefits and all those things, which allows me to put even more money on that. I want to be out of debt by December. I had $3,600 in credit card debt. In June, I started to pay that down. And at this point, I wanted to be down to like $1,500. Or actually, I believe my super audacious goal was $1,200 around this time. And right now, I am at $2,300. So I'm almost double of where I thought I was. However, I'm still down $1,300 since July in credit card debt. And so that's still a victory. So life's not going super bad. A lot of times, especially this is the way our brain works, we tend to look at the negatives instead of looking at the positives. So it's time to remember there are some good things going on in your life, and it's time to focus on that more and focus on your victories so you can build upon them. If you want to talk about focusing on victories, let's talk about Lorraine Reguly. Lorraine Reguly is an author and English teacher who is now a freelance editor, blogger, and entrepreneur. Her journey is motivational and inspirational. Lorraine is an author and wrote a book, From Nope to Hope, and is designed to help anyone who wishes to lead a happier life. She also helps other people become published authors. And now here's my interview with Lorraine Reguly. Hello, Lorraine, and welcome to my podcast.
Hi, Brett. How are you?
I am doing excellent. It is actually a beautiful day here in Seattle.
Oh, it's a beautiful day here in Thunder Bay, Ontario, too. Finally, it's because it's summertime here.
That's awesome. So it says here on your bio that you're an author?
I am an author. I have 2 books out at the moment. One is a nonfiction book called From Nope to Hope, and that is basically a self-help book for anyone wishing to lead a happier, healthier life, as well as overcome depression and suicidal thoughts if they happen to have those. My other book, Risky Issues, is a fictional book that contains 5 short stories. I have my hand in kind of a few different areas in terms of writing. But I noticed your book is very similar to your breaking out of prison, talks about a lot of the things that I talk about as well in terms of creating the ultimate mindset, because that's definitely one of the strategies I use in From Nope to Hope. One whole chapter is devoted to changing your mindset by using positive affirmations.
Yeah, mindset is extremely important to, live a hopeful and happy life. Definitely.
Exactly. And I think that's how come you and I got connected so well together, is because we both share the same sort of views in terms of being successful and changing your mindset to become the person you want to be and lead the life that you want to live.
So one thing I noticed in life, especially for us professionals who like to help other people, there's generally a reason, something in our background that leads us to that. So can you elaborate on your nope-filled years?
Yeah, my nope-filled years they started back when I was a teenager, when I was 14 and I was raped. I was a 14-year-old virgin at the time, and that traumatic event really, really devastated me and completely changed the course of my life, because I ended up quitting school. I fell into a really deep depression. I didn't know how to cope with everything, and I even tried committing suicide when I was 15. I started out in my teenage years, pretty rocky area. And then things just seemed to get worse before they got better. I ended up, like I said, I quit school. I didn't know how to cope with things. So I turned to drugs to try and fix my problems and numb the emotional pain. And I also started eating more, sleeping more. Like I said, I just had a lot of feelings of depression and hopelessness and despair, and my views about love and sex were very damaged and twisted because of what had happened to me. I ended up looking for love in all the wrong places and became promiscuous, thinking that, if I give guys sex, that means they love me. And then I quickly learned that wasn't true. Got involved with prostitution because I figured, I'm giving it away for free. Maybe I should get paid for it. That led to even more psychological trauma to my brain because of the feelings of degradation and other things that I had experienced throughout that period. It was a pretty rocky road before things got better. I became a single mom at the age of 18, and I decided to go back to school, become educated so that I could give my son a better life. So I went through 5 years of university, obtained 2 degrees, became a high school math and English teacher, did that for 3.5 years. I had to move away from my hometown to find a job. After 3.5 years, I'd had enough, so I moved back home, and I needed money quickly, and so I ended up getting back into prostitution. And when my son found out what I was doing, he basically disowned me and moved out. And he and I didn't speak for 3 years. And it was during those 3 years that I first of all, I hit rock bottom because the very first year afterwards, I ended up smoking crack for 10 months. So that was my absolute worst point in my life. And then I decided one day that I really needed to get my shit together. I needed my son back in my life. I needed to get off the streets, get off the drugs, and really make some serious changes so that I could pursue the life that I actually wanted and dreamed about. It was ironically after I started making changes and started becoming healthier, my appendix burst and I was literally dying. And they had to do emergency surgery to save my life, which they did. And it was at that point that I really had my aha moment. You hear people talking about those moments that they have in their lives, and some people never get them, but I actually was fortunate enough to have one simply because I had suffered from suicidal thoughts for so many years that I always thought, oh, I just want to die. I just want all this to be over with. But when I was literally faced with death, I realized I didn't want to die. I simply wanted my pain to end. And I also didn't want to die before saying goodbye to my son. And so I ended up getting back into contact with him. We ended up repairing our relationship. Once he learned about all the changes I had made and everything I had done to better myself, he became proud of me again for taking those steps. And so I continued on that path, and with his support and everything, I thought, okay, now is the time that I actually have to start chasing my dreams. I've always wanted to become an author. I've always loved writing and working with words. And so I ended up starting my own business, doing writing, editing, blogging. Then I learned about self-publishing, which is something that a lot of people don't know about, but it means basically anybody can become an author these days and put a book up for sale on Amazon, whether it's an ebook, a print book, or both. I learned how to do that, and I did that, and now I help other people become authors as well. Throughout my journey, there's been ups and downs, and now I'm at a much better place, specifically since 2011. That was my year of my rock bottom year. So for the last 8 years, things have been going extremely well for me, and I've repaired my relationship with my son. We're practically best friends now. It's wonderful. I started my business and it's growing and I'm doing really well there. So I don't really have anything to complain about now, but you are definitely right in terms of there's something in our past that always affects us and makes us want to change our lives and help other people now. And so now I get a lot of satisfaction with not just helping other people become authors, but helping them in terms of providing them with the strategies and techniques that I've outlined From Nope to Hope to help other people, like I said, lead their better life, their happier and healthier life, and become the person that they want to be.
Nice.
Sorry for the long-winded response, but I figured I had to give as much as a backstory to show, like, yes, I've been through hell and back again. And even though I've done that, and anybody out there who has done that, it is possible to move past all that and actually lead the life that you want. And I'm living proof. And I mean, I'm sure you have a very similar story with your life as well and your journey. So there's something that happened in your past, right, that made you want to do what you're doing today with help so many people.
Yeah, that's something that I noticed in my podcast is really most people who get into personal development started with a lot of personal pain.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, you hit rock bottom. What did you do to start building yourself up? What were the actual steps that you took to create these changes in your life?
First of all, I fixed in my mind that I had to make a change. And I think that was the driving factor for me, because a large part of it was because my son had disowned me and moved out and wanted nothing to do with me. And as a single mom, I mean, he was my life, my whole life for so many years. And when that piece was removed, I was shattered. I felt like my life isn't worth living anymore. So how do I fix this? And the solution was to get my son back in my life. That was step number one. I thought, okay, what is he going, what would my son want for me? Does he want me on the streets? No. Does he want me doing drugs? No. I got off the streets and I got off the drugs. And it was just shortly after that my appendix had burst. That was the point where it was, okay, this is kind of strange. Just when I start making all these positive changes, something really horrible happened. But at the same time, it also made me realize just how important my dreams were. And so I started chasing those dreams, and I started taking steps to make those dreams come true. And when my son and I had gotten back into contact, and this is a true testament to his unselfishness. At Christmas time, I asked him what he wanted for Christmas. He said nothing. He said, take that money and buy yourself something that you need. And I thought, well, I don't need anything. But what I ended up doing was I bought a book called the 2003 Writer's Market. And that is a book that lists all of the publishers in Canada and the United States, and some international publishers too, that would be interested in publishing my book. My first book, which is still actually unpublished to this day, but I'm currently looking at doing something with that in the upcoming months. I wrote a book when I was in university about Canadian poetry, and it was written as part of a Studies in Canadian Poetry course that I took. And my professor had given us, on the very first day of class, she said, okay, you have a choice. You can either do a 2-week take-home final exam, or you can take the time from now until the end of the course to write a book. And I want it written, if you choose that option, I want it written to these specifications, where you had to include 7 Canadian poets, a biography of each of them, one of their more famous poems, and then an in-depth poetry analysis of that poem using the techniques and analysis conventions that we were to learn in that particular course. We had the whole almost 4 months if we chose that option, we had the 4 months to write that book. And that's the option I chose because I figured, well, hey, I'm spending thousands and thousands of dollars for university education. I might as well do something that's actually worthwhile, aside from doing a 2-week take-home exam. I mean, what's that? That's nothing. So I ended up writing this book. And when I submitted it at the end of the course, my professor said that it was the best in the whole class out of all of the submissions she received. And I got 90% for my mark on that. And she encouraged me to get it published. Now, this is back in the late 90s, where self-publishing wasn't even in existence. The internet, we were just starting to use the internet back then. The technology hadn't advanced to the point where it is today. Back in 2003, when I bought the Writer's Market and I started reading it to do some research again on publishing my book, I learned that there was a thing called self-publishing. I also learned that authors are now expected, due to social media and the technology available to us, authors are now expected to help promote their own works, which meant I had to be on social media. I had to have a blog. I had to have a website. I had to do all of these things. And so at that point in my life, I didn't even own a laptop. All of the computers I've ever owned were old and from the dinosaur age, pretty much. I went out, I bought a brand spanking new laptop. I read some tutorials about blogging, and I got myself a website. Initially, it was a free website. I just dove in head first and I learned everything I possibly could. And then it was a year after I started my website that I actually started my business. It's been quite the interesting journey. And like I said, it all started with fixing in my mind my goal, what I wanted to do, and then taking steps every day towards reaching that goal.
So when you first started your business, what were some of the thoughts that went through your head? Were you able to just jump in, or were there anxieties you had to get through?
I actually never intended on starting a business. And that's the funny thing about my story is because like I said, when I started online and I bought my laptop, it was a way of getting my name out there and trying to grow a following so that I would have people to market my book to, make connections with people who either wanted to read about my stories or my poetry or whatever. And so when I started blogging, I only blogged about my personal experiences. In my mind, it was more of like an online diary type of a thing. And I just decided to share specific events and facts from my life about things that I had been through or facts about me. And then what ended up happening is a lot of the things that I wrote started ranking on the first page of Google. And people were visiting my website. Massive amounts of people were visiting my website. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, this is interesting. And because I had learned about blogging, and then so I kept learning, and I learned about SEO, which is search engine optimization, for actually how to rank in Google. Even though I had already been ranking in Google, I wanted to know why. And then I also wanted to rank more of my posts in Google as well. And so I basically was learning about how to be a better blogger. In that process, I started doing guest posting on other sites, and that's how I got involved in the freelance writing world. The very first guy that I guest posted on his site was called Dear Blogger. He loved my writing so much that he offered me a paid writing assignment that was an ongoing thing. Like every month he wanted me to write a particular something for his website, and he wanted to pay me for it. And I was like, oh wow, this is pretty cool. And then so that's how I got into freelance writing. After a year of blogging on my free website, I had learned, okay, well, if I'm going to monetize my site in any way, I need to have my own domain name. I need it to be on a self-hosted website. And so I made the move from the free platform to the paid platform. So I originally started on WordPress.com because my websites are WordPress sites. And that time I only had the one. I have two now. I decided, okay, so if I'm going to move to my own domain name, what kind of domain do I need for my site? Like, what do I call my site? And I thought, okay, well, this is a perfect opportunity to name it after a business and start a business because it just makes sense to do that. I became an entrepreneur just sort of by fluke. I never set out to do that, but that's what ended up happening. And once I did that, I realized, okay, so now there's a lot of things about running a business that I need to figure out. But because it was just me, I had to learn everything myself. So I think that was probably the most challenging part, is that I had to research everything online. I had to talk to other people. I actually ended up going through a program at the Paro Center for Women Entrepreneurs that's in my city. And I was helped to create a business plan for my business and set my business up and register it with the Canadian government, register it as a legit business. And so I did all that. I think the most challenging part was that I had to do everything alone. But I was able to figure it out. And as long as people have resources that they can turn to, there's other people out there willing to help them. As long as you use the resources that you're given, you can really do anything that you want.
In helping people publish their books, what has been your favorite success story with helping somebody?
I think it would have to be with Maxwell Ivy Jr. He is a blind man who has written 3 books so far, and I've helped him with each and every one of them. Max is an incredible person who has an amazing journey of his own. He used to weigh about 512 pounds, and he ended up deciding that he wanted to lose weight, and he decided to go the route of having gastric bypass surgery to help him. But he had to lose 80 pounds first before they would even do the surgery. And he did that, and then he had the surgery. He's about 6'3" or 6'4", so he's a pretty tall guy, and he weighs about 250 now. So he's lost over half of his body weight that from when he originally began. Not only does he have an amazing weight loss journey story, he also became an entrepreneur online after his family business, after they had to sell the family business after his father died. So he had to figure out a way how to support the family. And he started now he's got a few different businesses online. He does amusement equipment brokering. So he helps people buy and sell amusement equipment. He is a coach. He is an online media publicist where he will help business owners get matched to be on specific podcasts that are a good fit for that person. He has become an author. His first book is called Leading You Out of the Darkness into the Light, A Blind Man's Journey to Success, wherein he outlines 11 steps of his success that he followed to get to where he is, that anyone else can apply. His second book is all about his weight loss tips and his weight loss journey. His third book it's actually my favorite book that he's written, because he entered a contest. It's called Amtrak's Writer in Residency Contest. It's only open to residents of the United States. 24 winners each year are chosen out of all the United States, and he was one of the winners in 2016. He was given a trip to travel anywhere in the States that he wanted. He lives just outside of Houston, Texas, and he decided to travel to New York City over Christmas and New Year's that year. And even though he's a blind man, he ended up doing so many amazing things, amazing activities. Like he went skating in Rockefeller Center. He took the ferry over to go see the Statue of Liberty. The different activities that he did, and he traveled there all by himself. He didn't even have a companion. He traveled across country as a blind man on these trains. He went to go see a play. He's just done so many amazing things, and seeing and hearing about different people's journeys is probably one of the most rewarding things to me, especially when I get to read these books for free. Get paid to read these books and edit them and help them actually become a reality, and making other people's dreams come true, people who want to become authors and have no idea where to start. And then a few months later, after working with me, boom, they've got books on Amazon and they're published authors and they had their dream come true. So working with people doing that is extremely rewarding and satisfying, and I just love it. I've gotten to read so many different stories and helps people with so many different types of books, both fiction and nonfiction. It's just one of the most amazing things ever, and I'm so happy that I'm blessed that I can do this.
That is so cool. So we are coming to the end of our podcast, and one thing that I like to ask my interviewees is to give a 1 minute of motivation. You can think of this as if you got transported through a time machine back to your 8-year-old self, and you want to give yourself the information needed to live a joy-filled life, but you only have a minute to give it to your 8-year-old self. Or you can think of it as condensing your life's mission into a minute. So are you ready?
Sure. So I would say just never give up and keep taking steps every single day towards your goals, because those small steps will add up over time and you will be able to reach your goals if you continue to persevere.
Awesome. Thank you, Lorraine. I really enjoyed your story of how you went through so much and were able to persevere, and not only to build your life back, but to get to the point where you're actually helping other people reaching their hopes and dreams. So thank you for your contribution to this podcast, and thank you for your contribution to this world.
Oh, thank you so much, Brett. I really appreciate it. I'm very happy to share more. All people have to do is reach out to me. So they can find me on social media, my website, wordingwell.com. They can check my book out on Amazon, From Nope to Hope, whatever. I'm around.
Awesome. May your day be special.
Thanks, you too.
And there you have it, folks. That was my interview with Lorraine. First, I need to apologize because I believe I said her last name like 5 different ways. And so that's not the most professional of me, so that is my bad. I enjoyed her story. Such an accidental entrepreneurship. It's always interesting to me when you hear the talk about surrender and going with the flow in life. This is pretty much it. She was just following the next path after she got over crack and prostitution. It does surprise me how many crack prostitution people I have interviewed. I didn't think I'd be interviewing any. Well, one I knew, because one person I knew smoked crack, who is my Facebook friend, Kat Kim, but at the same time I thought her story was a little bit more special than it is. Turns out it's relatively common. Who knew? Drugs are common. But it's so cool to hear people bounce back. And when she bounced back and recognized the fact that she needs to change, because making that decision is important. Once you make that decision and stick with it and then just continue to move forward, which is what she did. I'm sure she had some trials and tribulations, but at the same time, she was like, oh, I need to do this. Oh, I need to do this. I need to do this. Ooh, if I want to do this, then I do this. And kind of just being curious. One thing I liked about Richard Bandler, he is the father of NLP. One of the things he talks about is that the opposite of fear isn't courage or lack of fear, it's curiosity, meaning just wondering what is going to happen next. And that's what Lorraine did. She wondered what was going to happen next and then continued down a path where now she helps authors write their books, which is super cool. I wrote my book and I can tell you that was an amazing experience. I hired a different book coach. But I do 100% recommend hiring a book coach. And if you listen to Lorraine today and she sounds like someone you'd want to work with, you should check her out. She talked about what she did already, but let me give you her actual website. It is her name, Lorraine Reguly, LorraineReguly.com. Her also business is wordingwell.com, WORDINGWELL, where she talks about her freelance blogging and such, so check her out. I'm sure you will like her a lot, like I did during the interview, and that is this episode of Joyous Expansion. If you liked it, please leave a like, a review, all those help. Stars, if you're on the iTunes, that would be super cool of you. Share it with people, or like, you would like this. If you want to get in touch with me, email me at BRE2Ts, at joyousexpansion.com. Also check out joyousexpansion.com, pod.joyousexpansion.com for more podcasts. Also, you can find me on Facebook at Increase Your Joy, at Instagram at Joyous Expansion, at Twitter at Joyous Expansion. I am Brett Dupree, your catalyst of transformation for the Church of Awesome. You can find that at Seven Stones Radio, that podcast, the Church of Awesome podcast. Champion of Authentic Joy and Joyous Expansion Life Coach. Here once again to remind you to be love, to be joy, to be awesome. Now play my jingle.
JoyousExpansion.com, JoyousExpansion.com. Come and say hello to Brett Dupree. He is an inspirational life coach, good for you and good for me. He turned my life from grey to blue, I'm sure he'll do the same for you. Get in touch and you'll see your life will change dramatically. JoyousExpansion.com, JoyousExpansion.com, yeah.